Eu acho que a nossa grande utopia hoje é a noção de humanidade. Porque no passado a gente vivia a família, o clã, a sociedade mais ampla, o Estado-nação, não é? Bom, e ninguém pensava na possibilidade de que somos todos os seres humanos. A religião fala disso, mas a política não. E o Marx dizia que isso era uma visão deformada, porque só haveria possibilidade de você pensar na humanidade quando não houvesse mais classes, porque havendo diferença de classe, os homens são desiguais. Bom, com a prática da vida e a mudança de tudo, com a integração econômica e a própria globalização, o que acontece? Os problemas globais se impuseram. Meio ambiente. Não adianta você pensar, eu vou salvar a minha classe no meio ambiente. Não tem. Você vai todo mundo. Aí o meu país. Não tem, porque a bomba atômica. Isso afeta a todos. Então, nós estamos revendo no mundo de hoje a necessidade de pensar na humanidade, todos os seres humanos. Bom, como é que você faz isso sem virar uma metafísica, uma coisa que não tem sentido, né? Você tem que definir regras maiores de governança global para que no processo de deliberação as pessoas possam ser incluídas nas decisões, né? E tem que separar muito bem o que é específico do interesse de uma comunidade familiar, nacional, ou o que seja, daquilo que é realmente regra universal, direitos humanos. Então, eu acho que progressivamente, no decorrer desse século, a luta generosa é de criar esse tipo de relação global que implique nos direitos humanos, respeita a diversidade, não vai querer homogeneidade, cada um vai ter sua cultura, sua forma de... Mas certos direitos são comuns, né? Acesso à água, né? Acesso a um ar limpo, né? Acesso à vida. São direitos que são universais. Então, eu acho que essa é a utopia não regressiva do nosso tempo.
That's not terrorism. It's something very, very, very different. So I think we quite rightly are a little bit worried about where we're going with security and issues of privacy, issues of what the state can and can't do. I believe so. They've said that this city has more cameras than any other city in the world.
The evils of human life don't disappear, they recur. They often recur under new names or new descriptions. So, for example, slavery in the 20th century occurred in Europe under the Nazis as Lebensraum. They expanded and enslaved those they didn't kill. It recurred in the Soviet Union under a socialist construction. It recurred in China in many forms. And now it recurs in this kind of capitalist period as human trafficking. It's a form of slavery. Myth doesn't give truth. Myth gives meaning, the meaning to the lives of those who subscribe to the myths. But myths can still be more or less truthful. And one of the two main tests of good and bad myths is how close a myth is to the enduring realities of human life. If it accepts the basic realities, which include, in my view, conflict within human beings, conflict within the human soul, then it's a better myth, it's a more truthful myth. Even though myths aren't literally true or false. But there's a second criterion, which is which is an ethical criterion, a moral criterion. Any myth that gives meaning to life by demonizing other human beings is a bad myth.
In June 1944, a young soldier surrendered to American paratroopers in the Allied invasion of Normandy. At first, his captors thought that he was Japanese, but he was in fact Korean. His name was Young Kyung-jong. The shadow of all wars, I think, is large and broad, and what is interesting, it's not very encouraging, but I think what is interesting is that wars have always accelerated technology. Now, sometimes those technologies have had peaceful applications, but whether it's the invention of the jet in the Second World War, the invention of the rocket towards space science and satellites. I mean, where would we be if it hadn't been for sort of, say, Werner von Braun and the V2 rocket or whatever, which was smashing London? Nowadays, what about our satellite telephones? It's almost a law of nature that an economic crisis is going to be far more divisive than a war, which does actually unify a country at the beginning. It may divide it at the end, and that's why, of course, you've had so many revolutions which emerge from a war.
Okay, thank you for talking to us, Mark Mazauer.
On the whole, I don't think that many people today believe, like the Victorians did, that it is Europe's mission to show the world something. But some people do think that still, even if the mission is a certain humane kind of capitalism. And that was a very common idea just before the crisis. In 2004, 5, 6, a lot of people were writing, Europe's mission is to show there's a third way between Chinese authoritarian capitalism on the one hand and American brutal laissez-faire capitalism on the other, and this is Europe's world mission. So they still talked in this very old way about what Europe should do for the world. People have been imagining futures for concepts for decades. Freedom in particular. Development is more recent concept. I don't think people are going to stop thinking about freedom or meaning very different things by it. And if by development you mean the desire for prosperity and growth and some kind of stability, they're going to be dreaming of that as well. And they're going to be looking for combinations of the two, as they have been doing for the last 200 years, or the period in which people thought about themselves as political subjects. So I think there's no reason this is going to stop anytime soon. Looking for other partners, okay.
So, do you think there is a future for freedom and prosperity?
And I think human rights and democracy is one of them. I don't think any country, any political group in the world. The future is definitely for freedom and prosperity. I think for increased prosperity for a large part of the world. I do think that one of the very important norms that got established in the towards the end of the 20th century is the global norm for democracy. I think you can export the idea of democracy, but I don't think you can actually impose democracy on other countries by invading them. So I think there are some truly global norms, and I think human rights and democracy is one of them. I don't think any country, any political group in the world would be justified if they said, we're different. We don't care about human rights, or we don't need human rights, or our people don't deserve democracy, or we should, there's no reason why we ought to be democratic until much later in the development. No, I think there are that I think one of the good things that has happened is that global norms have developed around human rights and democracy, and I don't think any regime in the world would be justified in saying our people do not need or deserve democracy.
les transformations de la restauration. Avant, il n'y a pas longtemps encore, jusqu'aux années 50, 60, quand on disait qu'on avait été au restaurant, la première chose, oui, c'était copieux. Les assiettes, c'était plein. C'était le critère d'un restaurant. Bon, aujourd'hui, pas du tout. D'abord, on me sert des petites choses, tout petites. Et surtout, quand vous écoutez les gens, vous dites, pourquoi vous allez au restaurant? Ah bon, au restaurant pour manger? Non, pas seulement pour manger. C'est une sortie, c'est une expérience. C'est le design, la table, la musique, l'architecture intérieure du restaurant. C'est sensitif. La technologie, à mon avis, n'est pas du tout un facteur qui éloigne l'homme des sensations. Elle lui fait rechercher de nouvelles sensations en permanence. Donc, il y a des riches et des pauvres, mais les pauvres connaissent le monde des riches aujourd'hui. Ils le voient et ils l'ont intériorisé. Et du coup, je crois que cette aspiration au bien-être, manifestement, se planétarise. Et c'est là le drame, c'est là le problème. Il n'y a jamais eu autant d'immigration parce que les gens n'acceptent plus, justement, de vivre dans le dénuement, dans la misère. Une des grandes motivations des rêves, déjà, des gens un ensemble de populations, c'est le rêve les voitures, les voyages, c'est le rêve de l'abondance en quelque sorte. Hein. Tout ça, c'est une utopie naturellement, mais elle s'est diffusée dans la planète, en particulier par les médias.
You know, I am a person who does not believe really in essential identities. I think we are dynamic, changing creatures, that we certainly have some kind of mammalian biological self, but that keeps changing over time as well. So identity politics was never very attractive to me. And I guess I've always felt that men and women, race is not even a biological category, it's a kind of invention of history, that these notions don't interest me very much. When I mentioned Martin Luther King, I grew up as a child during the Civil Rights Movement. My parents were very sympathetic to the movement. We watched the marches on television, so that was part of my childhood. And King's speech resonated very deeply, of course with Black Americans, but also with white Americans. And I think as a child, I spent a lot of time imagining what it would be like to be, you know, a little Black girl in the South. And without knowing it, when I was in the 4th and 5th grade, I started to read everything I could about abolitionism. In my novels, I have written as a woman and as a man. I have written as a father. I have written as a son.
2007, 2006, two French journalists were kidnapped by Al-Qaeda in Iraq. And this was before even, ISIS and so on, before the situation we face now. And in return for their release, they asked from the French government that they lift the ban about the wearing of the foulard. And there was a huge demonstration in Paris against this, and the women with the foulard, they went onto the street, in fact, with the foulard. French law was more liberal than it is now in recent years, and they had the tricolore painted on their foreheads. To me, that was an example, a brilliant example of democratic iteration, because what they were doing at that moment was, at one and the same time, asserting their rights as Muslim women to have their heads covered if they wanted to. They were asserting their rights as French citizens to demonstrate if they wanted to, and yet at the same time, they were saying, to the Islamic militants who wanted to negotiate with the French government to change the law, no, these are my freedoms. Stay away. You have nothing to say about this, right? It's a very interesting moment for a democratic iteration, and that's not a repetition, because at that moment, you have to think about what the right to wear the scarf means, and it certainly does not mean that that woman is simply an object of submission.
Há um problema fundamental de dignidade da espécie humana. Há um problema fundamental de integração dos pobres. Há um problema fundamental de integração de todas as populações. Hoje em dia, ao nível mundial, porque com a globalização, temos populações excluídas. E a globalização traz um problema de diferentes ritmos, de diferentes velocidades históricas. E há as populações que não estão na primeira carruagem e que estão excluídas e que se sentem excluídas e que estão vulneráveis a todo tipo de manipulação demagógica, todo tipo de fundamentalismos. Racismo não é inato na espécie humana. Racismo não existe em todo o mundo da mesma maneira. E em algumas partes do mundo é praticamente inexistente. Esta ideia de que está muito distribuído, eu acho que é completamente errado e não se pode provar historicamente. E o racismo, para mim, ocorre a partir de determinadas circunstâncias históricas, a partir de determinadas conjunturas e de locais.
Einstein cria esta teoria da relatividade geral em 1915 e há toda uma euforia durante os anos 20. Nos anos 30, a teoria é, de certa maneira, suprimida em certos países. Por exemplo, na Alemanha, com a subida do Reich, começa uma campanha para o que se chama a Deutsche Physik, a física alemã, que é especificamente uma campanha contra físicos judeus. E tem um impacto devastador na física alemã. Consegue correr com a maioria dos físicos, com os físicos judeus no sistema académico alemão. e consegue, no fundo, destruir a física alemã. E um dos ícones, ou um dos anti-ícones da Deutsche Physik é o Einstein. São as teorias, a teoria da relatividade, que consideram esotérica, difícil, pouco clara, que não é o exemplo perfeito da física judia, que eles não querem. Claro que Einstein deixa Berlim em 1933 e, portanto, já não deixa de fazer parte desse sistema, mas é um impacto devastador. O que é para mim a liberdade? A liberdade é uma coisa, é um conceito interessante e especialmente hoje em dia, com o qual tenho que me confrontar no dia a dia. Há uma certa obsessão com a liberdade de escolha, ok? E eu, de facto, eu tenho uma vida privilegiada, sou académico, trabalho nesta universidade, eu posso escolher o que eu faço, eu posso escolher o meu horário, eu posso escolher aquilo em que eu trabalho, eu posso tomar opções para a minha família em que tenho essa liberdade de escolher, mas o que me confronto no dia a dia com uma tensão entre a liberdade de escolha e o direito à igualdade. Isto